Now, the latest pro-Palestine march is set to go ahead tomorrow, clashing with Armistice Day. Thousands of people will try to participate in the remembrance events to pay their respects to those who lost their lives in World War I and II. However, they may face disruption. Despite calls from the Met Police to cancel the pro-Palestinian marches, the Met's Commissioner, Sir Mark Hurley, has decided to give it the green light. So what problems could the police face tomorrow and how should they tackle them? Well, I'll bring my pundits in just a second. But first up, let's speak to former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, they've got one hell of a job on their hands tomorrow.
Yes, they have, and there are many problems that they will have to plan for. The pro-Palestinians are just one of them. Of course, terrorism is going to be one of them. There'll be others, extreme right-wingers, wanting to get involved on the act, various Extinction Rebellion, Let's Stop Oil, people deciding they want to join in as well. For that reason, the Met have got some extra help that they've brought in 1,000 extra public order trained officers from around the country to support probably several extra thousand police officers who've been kept on duty and held in reserve for whatever the events will occur. Because the thing about tomorrow is that's not the main Remembrance Day event, and the main Palestinian march is planned for tomorrow, which is not scheduled to go anywhere near the cenotaph. The police have got well worked out contingency plans. They do it every year, and they will close off Whitehall at both ends to make sure those people who come to the cenotaph, i.e. the war widows and so on tomorrow, to pay their respects are not interfered with, as they will do on Sunday. I mean, a couple of things I would throw in here is, and people need to get it in perspective, everyone wants the police to get stuck in. Some people want them to even batter some of the people who perhaps views are different to the views that others have got. The problem you've got is the use of force by our police officers is done at the individual level. Everyone's got cameras on them. Everyone's got body cam on the police. And the police officers know that they will be judged in hindsight a year, 2 years later by the Independent Office of Police Conduct, which means that any single incident could be taken out of context, which is seen by some as going too far, will result in them either losing their jobs or being sacked. I personally think tactics, I think these tactics need to move forward and stop using the classic system they use now, which is put human being against human being in public order events, and start to do that which is done on the continent, which you mentioned earlier, which is bring in the use of water cannon and public order size pepper sprays and so on that keep the crowd distant from the police and avoid physical contact, because it is the physical contact that results in the greatest number of injuries to the police and the demonstrators. And for some reason in this country, everybody says, oh, water cannon, they're terrible. And even though I must say one of the great things Boris did do was bring them in, what we did then is Theresa May blocked them and Mayor Khan sold them off. So as a result of Labour politicians on one side and Tory politicians on the other side, police have not got the equipment which was deemed necessary after the 2011 riots to ultimately control severe disorder.
I've got to say, Boris was a decent mayor. We can debate his premiership, but he did well in London. Kevin, stay with me and let's bring in my top pundits this evening. We've got Mike Parry, we've also got Chris Wilde and Stephanie Tetchy. And if it's possible, Jonathan, let's have everyone, because I really want to have a bit of a Cobra meeting on this one, because I just worry, Mike Porky Parry, if things really kick off tomorrow. This is going to be a problem, not just for the Met Police, but really the reputation of this country.
Well, you say the reputation of this country. One of the reasons this is happening tomorrow is we are the most tolerant country in the world. Everybody knows that. Why do people come to this country? Because we're tolerant, we're forgiving, we want to embrace people from other lands. That's where we are. Now, Sir Mark Hurley, in my view, talking to an expert here from the police, of course, with us, I think is trying to get a better perspective of the way the police should work. But he's had to follow Dame Cressida Dick, 4 or 5 years of her, and she basically, I think, turned the Metropolitan Police into a sort of social services outfit.
Yeah.
And when policemen could come and knock on your door and say, we've seen an email or we've seen a tweet, we regard it as a hate crime, those same policemen need to be trained that if they hear somebody on the streets of London chanting jihad or from the river to the sea, that is a hate crime, and anybody who is espousing that should be arrested.
Now, Kevin, I wish our police officers, men and women serving our country, of course, in our cities every day. I love the cops. I mentioned it in my big opinion. How bad could things go horribly wrong tomorrow? What's the worst-case scenario, Kevin?
Well, I mean, first off, it's quite right. If people, that is a hate crime, chanting things like from river to the sea, because it means kill off all the Jewish people in Israel, which is an insult to most Jews in the UK. The problem with the idea of they should be arrested, and I am someone who's not only tried to arrest people in large crowds and actually done it, is it's easier said than done. Because, of course, it takes 3 or 4 people to minimum to drag someone out of the crowd, and then another 20 or 30 facing outwards like an outward-facing rugby scrum to fight your way out of the crowd, none of which look good. Then the riots develop, people try to free them, the police will be driven back, and it will get very bad. I think we've got 2 issues here to deal with, specifically with the pro-Palestinians, and that is because much of the group will be young Muslims. They get very excited and believe that that this is their chance to strike a blow for Islam by fighting back at what they think of the law, the force of law and order. So they will get very naughty indeed if arrests are made. And secondly, once it gets on social media, it can also be seen as a driver to drive Islamist-type terrorist actions by alone in the UK. And again, because our police are broadly unarmed, we remain extremely vulnerable to people running amok with knives and so on, as we've seen in the past. So, yes, they should be arrested, but it's far harder to do it in reality, particularly when the police officers on the ground are actually quite scared for the safety of their jobs.
It sounds like modern... Yeah, Kevin, it sounds like modern Britain is unpoliceable based upon what you've said. Chris Wilde, you've been shaking your head there. What do you think about this?
Kevin, just firstly, respect to the police force. They do a great job and it's incredibly difficult. I know a lot of police officers, they're quitting their jobs because they're scared to police these days. I'm not comfortable with the language of young Muslims are going to get excited and cause a problem, because I don't think that's the case at all. The police have an arduous job tomorrow. I think the most dangerous thing out of all this is language, our language, professional language. And saying that young Muslims are going to be going out there to cause deliberate problems is wrong, and that's the danger here.
But what about their language and what about their behaviour that we've seen for the last 4 weekends, Chris?
Hang on a minute. What percentage of that market? Give me some stats here.
I don't have the stats, but too many. Enough that you could hear people chanting for a jihad, which is a holy war, and calling for an intifada, which means suicide bombs in restaurants and on buses.
But that's a small minority, Mark. Rebellious.
It doesn't matter if it's one. It's one person using that march to voice those sort of opinions. That's got to be jumped
Let me finish. Stop. Let me finish.
Go for it, Chris.
Let me finish. Yes, if that kind of language is used and it's deemed to be...
It has been used.
Hang on 1 second. And it's deemed to be a risk. Yes, they should be arrested. But what we're doing is scaremongering. We're already predicting or preempting, but that's going to be the case. But we don't know.
Interesting. Kevin, briefly, Kevin, Chris raises an interesting point. Are we talking ourselves into this crisis?
Well, first off, I didn't say young Muslims are going out tomorrow to create trouble. What I said is because there will be a number of young Muslim men there and young Muslim women, such is their passion for their religion, that they will potentially overreact to arrests against people shouting from the river to the sea and so on as an attack on Islam, because they are likely, because we see it all the time, to act irrationally. So be clear, I didn't say they're going out as young Muslims to make trouble. I said that the way they react to their belief system could drive them to extreme violence, because we see it quite often.
And as you say, Kevin, videos of the police being heavy-handed will be weaponised and used as propaganda potentially on social media. Stephanie, last word goes to you. How would you like to see this weekend policed?
You know, I think areas around the cenotaph, I believe that they will be respected, and I don't
Well, we hope.
believe any trouble will come near there. I'm more worried about the pro-Palestine protest because I feel, based off Suella's comments, I do predict there will be a riot. I feel like she has, poured petrol on the fire, and now we have to worry about the extreme right now feeling bolstered
Talking
up,
sense,
feeling that the Metropolitan Police are against them. Now you have pro-Palestine people who've been depicted as they're violent. So
Thank you.
if you're going to strike them with that taint them with that brush, why won't they rise to the bait?
Kevin, always a privilege to have you on the programme. Catch up soon, sir. Former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, Kevin Hurley.